What's up, SCY? So glad that you're joining us for this brand new series. And here is the deal. Let me ask you a question just to start us off. Does anyone else suck at the little details? Like noticing the little things about just everyday life? Like if you go to look in the refrigerator, something's right there in front of you, but you just can't seem to find it, right? To prove a point, my wife did something that I actually find a little bit mean, to be honest with you, is that she left a piece of trash in the middle of our hallway, okay? And she wrote upside down and she wrote on the back of it, if you pick this up and turn it into me, I will give you $100 to spend, literally. And a whole week went by. I didn't see that piece of trash. I walked right by it. I didn't even notice it. And I missed out on $100. She brought it to me and I was like, you lie. She took a picture of it, date stamped and all that stuff, right? Like that's just, well, first of all, mean, okay? How dare you? Second of all, that's just not my personality. Like I miss the little things, the little details about, I'm like big picture in the way that I think. And so just like I missed out on a really big opportunity for missing the little things that could have happened. See, here's the truth. We do this all the time in our faith. We do this all the time. We miss out on doing the little things that could have big payoff later in our faith, in our relationship with the Lord. And the thing is, when we could actually miss out on some pretty big things. And now here's the thing. Most of us, we don't think about a lot of the small things that go on in our spiritual lives when it comes to our faith. We kind of look at the bigger picture because the bigger picture is something, it's not of this world. It's heaven. We know as believers, heaven is the goal. That's where we are going to go. And our culture seems to drown out a little bit the smaller steps of our faith because people deem it super insignificant. Like it's not that big of a deal. Let me list a few things of like little things. Again, it's not to guilt trip you. Just I want to ask you some real questions. The things that we miss out on a daily basis in regards to our faith that could have huge impacts on our life in the end. So like reading the Bible. Not even daily, like weekly, right? When's the last time that you open it up? Praying consistently, just having a conversation with God, coming to Wednesdays consistently, opening up and just like sharing in groups. Do you do that consistently? Inviting your one to church, to a Wednesday night. Talking to that lonely kid at school, praying for the people that you don't like, right? Because it's really impossible to hate someone that you're intentionally praying for. Serving. Are you giving in your time and your finances? On the weekends, have you joined a team? Being encouraging and not critical. Some of you, you're critiquing me right now, okay? Encouraging and not critical to the people around you. Acknowledging like the homeless person you see on the corner every day, right? Honoring your parents. Right? Like that's that kind of stuff. The little things in our life, in our faith, that in the long run really make a big difference, but we seem to drown it out because we don't think it makes a difference right now. See, now I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, but the truth is I mess up on a lot of these all the time. I'm not perfect at any of these by any means, but these are all very small steps in our faith that when done consistently and obediently, in the long run, we will see a much stronger and more powerful faith, and we will see God do some pretty amazing things. See, and for us, maybe it's not making a difference physically, but spiritually, I think that's something that's some of us are doing really well in, and some of us are actually suffering because we're not taking these things. So like, have you ever really thought about this idea of like, does my faith really matter? Maybe you've thought that before. Like, is this whole Wednesday night thing, coming to group, studying, hearing about this book that was written, over, between 2,000, 3,000 years, all the stories, like, does this really matter, right? Maybe you thought like, hey, is Jesus even real? Is this a real thing? Is this even worth it? Is this worth giving my time and my energy and my effort into, because a lot of the stuff that's said here that Jesus teaches is hard. Is it worth it? Is it worth doing that? Do I really believe what the Bible says? Is it really God's word? Because here's the thing, our culture, our world says that it's not. And what do you believe, right? Maybe you've struggled with that. Maybe you've wondered like, hey, what on earth am I here for? Why am I even on this planet? Why am I existing? And then, man, like, does my community group even matter? Does coming together and talking and sharing about my faith and struggles and problems and all these things, does that actually matter? And I've thought those things. I thought those things, and even today, like as I'm teaching you, I still think those things. But these are big questions, and guess what? The answer to a lot of these big questions about faith begin with little actions of faith in our daily lives. So the answers to these questions, these really big questions, start with the little things that we do on a daily basis. And as Christians, we believe that the ultimate goal is heaven, that you only get there through Jesus Christ. But while we're here on this earth, there's a whole bunch of little things that add up to strengthen our faith and belief system. That's not our parents, that's not what the world teaches, but what we believe because we've put in the work and the obedience of following Jesus and what he commands us to do. See, everyone wants life change to happen, but not everyone is willing to put in the little work to make it happen. We all want the life change, but none of us are willing to do the small things that make a big difference. Because usually when we respond in faith, God responds with miracles. And it begins with the small movements in that. And it's all about being faithful with what God has given you, no matter how small the task. So when we look in our series, as we're talking about, like, it's about time. Looking at David and Goliath, this story. If you've been around church, you've heard this before. You've heard this story, but maybe this is new to you. It's in the Old Testament. And David, he's a shepherd boy. And he's already anointed to be king. Like, he's going to be the king. And instead of being sent to the throne where he's going to lead a nation of people right away, God has something else for him. That God would do big things in his life eventually, but David had to do the small things of obedience first. And I think that's the same thing that God does with us. God wants to do big things in your life, but we have to be willing to do the small acts of faith now. Okay, so here's the thing. So he gets called into this meeting with Samuel. And Samuel said, hey, God has anointed you the next king. And he's sent back into the shepherd's field. Not only that, he's sent on a task, an errand for his older brothers to bring his brothers cheese and bread into the middle of this impossible winning battle. So if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down real quick because I think it's going to set us up for the rest of our time. Is starting small is harder than finishing big. David, if you read the rest of his story, went on to do amazing things, but David's beginning started with the small things. We get stuck in the "are we there yet" mentality. It's the mentality that tells us that the journey isn't worth the destination. But let me tell you that tonight, that the destination is worth it, and your calling is worth it, and God's plan for your life is worth it. And I wish I could go to the gym once and look shredded, right? Like, I know you can't tell, you can tell by my physical appearance right now, I'm pretty shredded already, right? But here's the thing. I wish I could go to the gym one time and I'm done. But that's not how it works. If I tried to go right now and deadlift 450 pounds, one, I'd probably pull a muscle. Two, I'd probably cuss really loudly for everybody to hear, and that would not be good. And then three, I'd probably die of a pot vein in my head, right? Because I haven't trained myself on the little things to get to the big things. The small things make a big difference in our faith. And here's the thing. Are you going to read the Bible every day right off the bat? Probably not. But you could start by reading it like once a week. You could start by like praying just for like a few minutes, maybe sitting in silence, right? Just like for a little bit without anything happening in your heads. Like, it's not going to happen right away. David was here too. He was a shepherd. He was anointed to be king in front of the entire world. But before David, there was this guy named Saul. Saul started off right, but then he got a little bit crazy. He got so impatient with God that he started to do his own things in his own way, in his own timing. And it sounds like anyone that we know, kind of us a little bit. We get impatient with God because we want him to move, but he doesn't. So we do our own thing. And so God wanted a new king, and he called Jesse to call his sons forward. He picked up the smallest and youngest of all of the brothers, and it was David. But instead of going straight to power, he went back to the field to tend the sheep, and just like he always did. And he needed to keep doing the small things until God called them to do the big things. In Zechariah 4:10, it says, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. See, here's the thing. Don't despise the small things. God enjoys when you just take that first step. He enjoys when you do that little thing. See, you can't get to your final step if you're not willing to take the first step. You can't get to where you want to be until you take the small first step first, okay? Number 2, write this down. God's biggest dreams for you are unlocked by your smallest steps. Okay? God's biggest dreams for you are unlocked by your smallest steps. It was during the time that David was waiting in the shepherd's field that his people, Israel, got into a war with the enemies of Israel, the Philistines. And these were like the main, like if you read the Old Testament, these were like the main people that stood up against the Israelites. Look what it says in 1 Samuel 17, starting in verse 17. It says, one day Jesse said to David, take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers and give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain. See, now your brothers are getting along and bring back a report of how they're doing. David's brothers were with Saul and the Israelite army in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So David left the sheep with another shepherd, set out early next morning with the gifts as Jesse has directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. Soon the Israelites and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers, and that he was talking with them with Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks, and David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel. See, David, he was called to be king a while ago, but God asked him to start as a delivery boy. He was called to be king, but he first started by just delivering bread and cheese to the front lines. See, and my question to you is, what would happen if he thought he was too good for that? He already knew he was going to be king. Yet he was told to do this little small errand. What would have happened if he didn't go? He would have missed out on slaying the giant. He would have missed out on the opportunity that God has presented with him, all because he was just obedient with the small things. That David being obedient to the small things gave him the opportunity to do something huge in his faith. That he would kill Goliath. He would be the famed warrior champion with a smooth stone and a slingshot to the face, right? Like that's what he got to do because of his small act of obedience. See, don't miss out. Listen, don't miss out on God's best because you're too good to do the small things. You know that thing, they're like, I don't need to do that. Oh, that's going to waste my time. Oh, that's just a little thing. Don't miss out on what God has for you because you're too good to do the small things of faith. See, being faithful with a loaf of bread and a few pieces of cheese, you could slay giants. Like that's what David did. He was faithful in those things, okay? Third thing, I want you to write this down. Simple obedience and faithfulness unlocks God's promise in your life. Okay? Simple obedience and faithfulness unlocks God's promise in your life. Let's continue reading here because I want you to catch this in this story. 1 Samuel 17, verses 45 to 50. It says, David replied to the Philistine, you come with me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's army. So David, remember, he left off, he heard what Goliath was saying. No one was stepping up to fight him. No one was stepping up to fight Goliath. And David was like, I'll do it. Little guy. Right? No armor, didn't fit him. All he had was a slingshot. He stepped up to do this. And this is what he's saying back to Goliath. So the God of armies of Israel, whom you have defied, today the Lord will conquer you and I will cut off your head. You think the Bible's boring? It's like, this is a full-on amazing fun story, like a Netflix show could be made about this. I'm going to cut off your head, right? So he's going, and then I will give your head to the bodies of your own men, to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel, and everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear, but with the Lord's battle he will give he will give you to us. And as Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag, taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling to hit the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. See, most of the time, God, in order for you to do some of the big things in your life, God has already given you the things to do it. David, he was a shepherd. He had the shepherd things and a shepherd bag. He already had it. He was able to use what he already had to do some pretty amazing things. See, that time of being called to be king, waiting in the shepherd's field was everything. It made David hungry. It made him desperate. It made him see like Goliath as like not this big giant, but something that God has given him an opportunity to step up. He looks at Goliath with a brutal intent, a focused intent, and he doesn't say, oh no, a giant, I can't believe what's going to happen. But the intent that says, hey, you're mine and I've been waiting for you. And you're the poor person that's standing in the way between what God has for me and the obedience that I have in my life. See, David's simple obedience led him to the place where his fame and his journey of king would begin. All by simply just being obedient and waiting. All by taking a simple act and acting upon that. If he didn't do that, this story wouldn't have happened. See, I believe the same when it comes to our faith, that God has something for you. And the question is, do you actually believe it? Do you believe it? See, you might be like, Justin, there's nothing happening in my life right now. I don't even feel God half the time. I don't even know why I am here. What does God have for me? And I would say to you, where have you taken the small steps in your faith to begin to experience God in small ways? What little things have you done, have taken a step towards faith? That maybe you're not a shepherd in the field with bread and cheese, but you're in a seat with money in your pocket. That you're at a school, at a lunch, and the ability to chat with someone who is lonely. That you're one daily devotional away from God radically speaking into your life. That your friend is one invite away from having their eternity changed because of an invite, and they got to experience God in a real way. That you're one decision away from God changing your entire life. See, here's the thing as we end, that God tends to start small in our lives, just like he did with David, to prep us for the big things that he has for us. So I'm excited to hear about what conversations look like in your groups. We're going to leave it right there. Enjoy the questions, talk about them, and I'm excited to see what God continues to do in your life as we move on through this series. Love you, SCY. See you next week.